My father was hosting this time, one of a rotating series of 1960s business school faculty parties, gatherings straight out of Mad Men. There was a full wet bar, liquor bottles in rainbows of color, chrome martini shaker, jigger, spoons, strainers, a crystal ice bucket, green stuffed olives, baby pearl onions, and hand-blown martini glasses from Venice. My mother arranged the hors d'oeuvres as the first guests were about to arrive, glass and chrome clattering against one another. She was, and always had been, a loner. "This is a part of my job," my father said defensively, sensing her mood. My mother said nothing. "And this is the life you chose when you married me," he continued. She stared back, sipping a straight gin over ice, and already halfway through it. At the back corner of the living room, a half-finished oil painting rested on a pine wood easel. Painting was the last remnant of the Greenwich Village bohemian life she'd left behind. That, and listening to the black folk singer Josh White, who had dated her village roommate. The oil painting featured a not entirely attractive young woman, staring seductively out at the viewer, with full pendulous breasts, her legs crossed, and a thick bush of pubic hair at the apex. "For God's sake," my father said, suddenly noticing the canvas within the visual of the room. "You've got to cover that thing up. If someone asks to see it, then fine, but don't shove it in everyone's face." Wordlessly, my mother positioned a drop cloth over the canvas, the model's bare ankles still visible at the bottom. She put on a Josh White record, the oak stereo console booming out St. James Infirmary. "It was down by old Joe's barroom on the corner of the square. They were serving drinks as usual, and the usual crowd was there." Her hips swayed almost imperceptibly to the words in the bluesy guitar bends as she made her way back to arranging the hors d'oeuvres. My father had hired the college-age son of a neighbor to bartend. Vance was a former high school football jock, all crew-cut, biceps, and muscled neck. The party was soon in full swing, and the faculty wives drank up Vance's testosterone-fueled attentions as he poured their elixirs, putting on a show with the chrome martini shaker, holding their hungry gazes. Vance's younger brother was in my high school class, so we knew one another. "Hey, kid," he said, as I passed by, motioning me over. There was a glint in his eye. He grabbed an opaque plastic cup, pouring me several shots of sherry. "Mum's the word," he said. I nodded, relishing our secret camaraderie. Walking off, I took a sip. It went down easy. I was soon pleasantly high, drifting through the sea of plaid jackets and summer dresses, taking in the mindless adult chatter as if transmissions from space. Emboldened by the sherry, I decided to take the party up a notch. I faded down Sinatra on the stereo and substituted the Jimi Hendrix Experience, expecting my father to intervene within seconds, but no one did. I cranked up the bass, giving it some extra bottom. "Good pick," said a husky female voice. Professor Benson's young wife, Joyce, knelt down beside me at the stereo. I could feel her hot breath on me, sweet with some indistinct liquor. "They should have put you in charge of the music all along," she smiled, dragging on a cigarette. She looked at me in a way that I'd never experienced with a woman. I could tell that she was high as well. I turned from her probing eyes, pretending to adjust the sound. I'd already finished the cup of sherry and was now on a second, courtesy of Vance. Joyce continued talking, but her words were increasingly incomprehensible, drifting over one another in my drunken mind. She touched her hand to my calf, emphasizing some point she'd been making, and I felt electricity go through me. I closed my eyes for a moment, and the room began to spin. I tried to stand up, grabbing the edge of the stereo cabinet. The whole thing began to lurch forward, almost going onto the floor, but I righted it in time. I looked up, and Joyce was gone. My college-age brother was wearing his best paisley shirt, tan slacks, and penny loafers, trying to appear more adult than he really was. I watched him across the room in animated conversation with Professor Abelson, who quietly smoked a pipe, taking in my brother's impassioned expositions on the military-industrial complex and the American war machine. But from my brother's slurred words and the exaggerated tone in his voice, I could tell he was also high. I made momentary eye contact with Vance, who was watching my brother from behind the bar. He gave me a conspiratorial thumbs up. My father worked the room like a king, flattering the faculty wives, freshening the drinks of colleagues, and leaving a trail of raucous laughter in his wake. My mother stood in a far corner, nursing a highball, observing the gathering like an alien anthropologist. Needing to pee, I headed down the long hall past the bedroom I shared with my brother. I found the bathroom door inexplicably half open, the light on, and the fan humming. Peering in, I saw my brother slumped over on the toilet, his pants around his feet. Panicked, I glanced down the hall, wondering how many might have passed by. Stepping back into the room, I closed and locked the door. I nudged my brother, but he merely groaned. Looking down, I discovered that he'd vomited in the cloth bowl of his cotton briefs, a hardening gray sludge of shrimp hors d'oeuvres. Closing the door back behind me, I went in frantic search of my mother, finding her in conversation with my father's colleague, Bob Dickerson, a former college football star and now sports memorabilia entrepreneur. She seemed unusually animated around Dickerson, laughing at his jokes in a way that I knew was forced and out of character. She lightly touched his bare forearm, offering to freshen his drink. I followed her to the bar. "I need your help," I said urgently. "I'm busy," she replied evenly, adding ice to Dickerson's glass. "I'm serious," I insisted. "There's been an accident in the bathroom with Mike." She looked back at me in disbelief. "God damn it," she hissed. "Can't I ever have any enjoyment in life?" She made her way back to Dickerson with the drink, telling him that she'd be right back. We slipped into the bathroom and together managed to get the soiled underpants off of my brother, wrapping his lower half in a large smiley-face beach towel. I scanned the hall outside, making sure the coast was clear, then motioned to my mother. Supporting him on either side, we made it to my and my brother's bedroom, laying him on the nearest mattress, mine. The minute he hit the sheets, another paroxysm of vomit came, more gray sludge, and in great volumes, running down the wall alongside my bed. My mother returned with a wet towel, cleaning up the mess, looking angrier than I'd ever seen her. My brother was soon passed out again, sprawled across the bed. She stared down at him, strangely expressionless. "I have to get back to the party," she said. I knew that she wanted to get back to Dickerson. Still high myself, I lay on my brother's bed, closing my eyes. I felt as if I was hurtling backward at an ever-increasing speed. Opening my eyes to make it stop, I put on an 8-track tape of Pink Floyd, the ethereal strains washing over the moonlit room. I stared up at the 60s psychedelic poster on the wall above my brother, concentric day-glow orange rectangles on solid black, receding into a distant infinity. My parents had gotten it for me during a weekend trip to San Francisco. At the center of the smallest rectangle, in block letters, it had said, "Love." But I found it corny and uncool, almost embarrassing to have on my wall. So I thanked them, then cut out a similarly sized image from a magazine of the 2001 astronaut who'd been murdered by Hal, his lifeless body drifting in space. I taped the image over the word love. I must have dozed off. I woke to my mother's voice from the other room, saying goodnight to the various guests. I stepped out into the hall. Vance had already been paid and sent home. My father and several of the other professors had gone for a walk down at the seaside cliffs, the wives planning to pick them up there later. Joyce threaded her way through the crowd to my side, complimenting me again on my musical taste, her hand soft in mine. "I really enjoyed talking with you," she said, looking me in the eye. Dickerson had inexplicably remained behind. As everyone filed out the door, he thanked my mother for a wonderful evening, taking her by the hand. He kissed her on the cheek, and she turned into it. After the last of the guests had left, my mother turned to me with fire in her eyes. She made her way back to the bedroom, angrily shaking my brother awake. He looked momentarily stunned and disoriented, scanning the darkened room, awareness slowly coming into his eyes. "God damn you," she screamed. "You threw up all over the bathroom, all over the wall here, and God knows who might have seen you. Do you know what that could do to your father's career?" His eyes suddenly narrowed, anger rising in them. He seemed strangely energized by her outburst. He got out of the bed. Tossing the towel aside, he put on a pair of blue jeans with no underwear, oblivious to my mother's presence. "What do you care about his career anyway?" he shot back, "other than this house and the life it brings you?" He wandered out to the living room, eyeing the bombed-out remnants of the party, half-eaten hors d'oeuvres, pieces of olives and cheese cubes on toothpicks, glasses scattered everywhere. My mother followed after, still not done with him. For some reason, my brother suddenly focused on my mother's painting on the back corner. From repeated surreptitious viewings by the men at the party, the drop cloth now exposed a good half of the painting, including a large breast. He eyed the canvas for a moment, then pulled the cloth entirely away, tossing it to the floor. He'd always hated her nudes, was embarrassed to have his friends over because of them. He circled the easel in mock admiration. "Such delicate brushstrokes, such artistry," he said, leaning in close. He looked back at my mother. "You know," he mused professorially, "in the future, they'll just connect electrodes to your head, and ideas like this will appear on a computer screen, fully formed." He snapped his finger close in front of her face. "Like that." She stared back at him, expressionless. "You save the image, and you're done," he continued, looking intently at her, as if waiting for full comprehension of his boozy predictions. And then he went in for the kill. Only a hell of a lot better than this shit. "You bastard," she said, slapping him. He appeared stunned and momentarily disoriented, clearly still half drunk. Rage began to rise in him. Still barefoot, he glowered back at her, then defiantly stomped on a clear plastic trash can alongside the wet bar. The hard plastic pieces shot out across the tile floor. But then his expression suddenly changed, from drunken confusion to horror. The three of us looked down as a dark pool of blood began growing outward from his big toe. My mother sat him down on a nearby chair, then grabbed another chair and propped up his leg to get a better look and to elevate the foot. My brother's face blanched, his eyes becoming glazed and unfocused. She pressured a white washcloth around the toe. It quickly soaked red. Unwrapping the cloth, we caught a brief glimpse of the cut before it was drowned in more blood, a surgically precise V-shaped incision, and inside what looked like tendons. My mother grabbed several more fresh washcloths, telling him to press one around the toe, panic rising in her voice. Together we helped him down the stairs to the ground floor garage, knowing that we had to get to an ER, and soon. Descending the staircase, I felt my brother getting heavier and heavier. I glanced up and saw a faraway look in his eyes. A large, scrubby field lay just beyond our driveway. As my mother backed out of the garage, our headlights swept the far wall. Small black scorpions peppered the stucco. As we drove away, I imagined them watching us. Several hours and 10 stitches later, we returned home. It was just after 2 a.m. The ER doctor said that my brother had lost so much blood, they'd considered a transfusion. Pulling back into the garage, the scorpions were still there, waiting, watching. My mother killed the engine, heaving a long sigh, her hands still tight on the wheel. We helped my brother back up the stairs, his foot heavily bandaged now. My father was back from the moonlit walk with his buddies, his checkered sport coat draped across the Davenport sofa. My mother peered into their bedroom, but he was fast asleep. She guided my brother into bed, gently arranging the covers over his foot so as to not apply pressure. She looked down at him for a long moment in the semi-dark, and then softly kissed him on the forehead. "I'm glad you're okay, sweetie," she said, with genuine tenderness. "Thanks a lot, Mom," he said, his voice nearly cracking. "Good night, you two," she said finally, turning off the light. "Good night, Mom," I said. My brother fell into an exhausted oblivion and soon began snoring. But I couldn't sleep. I heard my mother stacking dishes in the kitchen sink. There, in the moonlit bedroom, I stared up at my poster and the image at the center. I imagined myself adrift in space, solitary and peaceful, in search of the monolith and whatever might lay beyond. And then, through the closed door, I heard the sad, faint strains of St. James Infirmary on the living room stereo. My mother's voice, softly singing along.